I say that because you can find me under that name. It's Hypnotherapy with Rayne. And that's my website. That's how you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and anywhere else is linked on my website. So as long as you can spell my name, you can find me. And what I am about, let me see. Like you said, empower moms. So I have a method that's empowered parenting. It's finding calm in the chaos. And it's specifically geared towards moms who have children with mental health issues, mental health challenges. And it's helping them reprioritize themselves, lose the mom guilt, which is the biggest thing, right? And really just kind of find peace again in the family and in their relationships with their child, with their other family members, with their partner, with their friends. Yeah, and get some calm back to the chaotic life that comes with raising a child with mental health challenges.
I know some of my friends would love to speak to you because you're trying to help them be better. And when you mention mom guilt, that's something I've heard from many of my female friends. So describe to us, what is mom guilt and how does it impact the lives of mothers?
Mom guilt, it seems to be something specific to moms. It seems to not affect dads in the same way for whatever reason. I'm not sure what that is, but it really comes at you from every angle. So moms feel guilty right when they go back to work, or they feel guilty if they don't go to work and they stay home. Moms feel guilty if they make the child's lunch. They feel guilty if they have the kid buy the lunch. It's all these, like, whatever you do is just not quite good enough. It's an underlying thing that we want to do everything for our child, make their lives easier. We want to show up in the best way possible. You know, if your kid's upset, you want to go help them, right? It's a lot of this, like, trying to make life easier for your child. And I think it probably comes from the child was a part of you, and now you're still trying to, nurture it in the best way possible. And you just feel guilty about every mistake along the way. The kid falls down the stairs. Well, you feel guilty you weren't there right at the time to catch them as they fall down the stairs, so to speak. And it's certainly irrational. It's not something that you can do. You can't be everywhere all the time, and you can't do all the things all the time. Nobody's perfect, but it's just something that mothers seem to share, even though it's irrational. It's just something they all share. And I like to say that when your child suffers with mental health issues, it's like your mom guilt is on steroids, because there's just so many other issues going on that it just intensifies everything. Yeah, and when I talk to dads, they don't seem to have the same type of guilt. I'm not sure why. I don't know what that's about, but it's not quite the same as it is for moms.
I wonder if it's like a pendulum, because you have like mothers who are the early caregivers and providers and instructor of the child, right? Because they carry the child.
Yeah.
They're breastfeeding if they're going to breastfeed, they're bottle feeding if they're going to do that. But the bond is so much closer. And then as a child starts to age, it kind of swings to maybe the fathers who are, okay, now I'm the protector of the child. Now I'm the benefactor of the child. I'm the provider. I'm the resource. I wonder if the guilt that mothers experience is more early on, and then the fathers are trying to experience, and they're experiencing it a little bit later. Because to your point, they experience it in different ways.
Yeah.
They seem to be experiencing it at different times in the child's life. And then when you throw in a mental health scenario in there, it's like, it's just uber mom guilt, uber
It really
tech,
is. Yeah.
right? So when you're speaking to these women, are you pulling from an experience that you had on your journey?
Yeah. So I have 3 kids, and my middle daughter suffers with an array of mental health issues, anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, SI, all sorts of things. And we ran the cycle of different therapies, different doctors, different programs, inpatient hospitalization. We did partial programs, which is like they go to the hospital for the day, they come home at night. Home-based therapies when people would come into the house. I mean, the array of just, things that we tried. And what happens is it becomes this overwhelming, all-encompassing thing, and it becomes the focal point of the family, right? Because it affects everybody. It affects everybody's life. It affects your job. It affects your health. It affects everything. And it's just becomes central to the family unit. And as as the parent or as the mother, you try to fix it. It's what we do. We try to advocate for them, research for it, do the therapy for them, tell them what to do. It's like a control thing almost, like you want to make it better. And yeah, there's a moment when you have to realize that the whole giving from an empty bucket type of thing, right? If you're so depleted because all your energy is going into helping your kid, or doing what you think is helping your kid, sorry, you run out. You run out of steam. You run out of, your bucket runs dry. And it's really just helping women reprioritize themselves and their own health, because in reality, that's what's going to help your child. Because you need to be your best self so that you can walk beside your kid and help them on their journey, as opposed to doing it for them, which is, I think, what just comes naturally is you just want to fix it, right? Your kid's sick, you want to fix it however you can. And when it comes to mental health, it's not something that you can do for them. They need to really learn how to deal with themselves. It's going to be a lifelong journey. It's not something that goes away. So it's something that they need to learn to navigate. And I think it's hard for parents to step back and, it was certainly hard for me to realize I'm completely running on empty. No good is coming from me right now, right? I'm functioning, but I'm so depleted that there's nothing positive that I can do. There's that moment where you're like, well, I have to take care of me. Put your own oxygen mask on first in the airplane crash, so to speak, because you just can't help them when you're running on empty. But I think a lot of parents just tend to go until they're falling apart. Their physical health, their mental health, like they're just falling apart. And that's just not the way to do it. We just think it is. So.
Yeah, I think parents sometimes forget that they're human themselves.
Yeah.
And I get it because I don't have children myself, but I do understand the dynamic that, well, I brought this child into this world. I need to be the provider for that child because that child is relying on me. Yeah. But if you're not well as a parent, if you're not healthy, to use your analogy, if you're not full in your cup to help them, right?
Yeah.
You're not good to anybody at that point. Was that something that you had to learn where you're running on empty and you're like, hey, Rayne, you got to take a moment and take care of yourself, because if this continues, you won't even be here long enough to see your child grow up?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was to the point of, there was nothing left, right? I was just going through the motions and trying to survive another day, because you are in survival mode. When your kid has these issues, you don't know. You might wake up and it could be a good day, but even then you're spending the whole day waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. You're walking on eggshells. You don't know what's going to happen next. And then you could wake up and it could be a terrible day. Or you may not even wake up because you're up all night. You just never know. And yeah, when you don't take the time to nurture yourself, you just end up running on empty. And yeah, I mean, I got to the point where I was just barely doing anything. I was just kind of surviving. I was for sure in survival mode. And that's not fair for my other children, right? Like, just survival mode. That's it. I was doing what needed to be done. I was getting through the day, getting to all the appointments, and then that was it. I was done. I was like, there's no energy left for myself, right? And it's hard to make that internal shift to, well, no, now I'm going to carve out 5 minutes a day for me. I'm just going to, or now I'm going to walk away from the situation that's, a bit much. So yeah, it took getting to that point, but I feel like it doesn't have to, you know.
Looking back, because that sounds more like a reflective type of comment. Why do you feel that you didn't have to go through what you went through?
Well, because I could have stopped it sooner, right? Like I could have, if I knew then what I know now. It's that whole if only I knew then what I know now. Um, realizing that I didn't have to give 130%, because if I took, say, just a short amount of time for myself, then I would have had more. I would have been more fulfilled. I would have been in a better place to show up better. That's a big part of it. And another part was learning what my triggers were, right? So if they're set off with something, so say your kid has anxiety, something sets them off and they're having an anxiety attack, and say, okay, I also have anxiety. Well, her anxiety attacks causing me to have anxiety. And then you're just spiraling into this big ball of like, things just getting worse and they don't need to. Yeah. So it's not an easy thing, but it definitely is something that I think if parents come to that realization sooner, it would be helpful. It help you face the challenges that are just, they're going to be there, if that makes sense.
It does. And I find that to be sometimes a difficult conversation to have, because we would want to tell parents, hey guys, for your own mental health, you may need to take a step back and sometimes put your children, or grow your children, raise your children to the point where they can resolve some of the things that maybe they're going to have to learn to do to take it off of your plate. And when you're speaking to women, Rayne, is that a difficult conversation to have, to tell the mothers, hey, you don't always have to do everything yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It seems to be an ingrained thing. Like mothers feel like they have to do it all. It's just, and it's a self-worth too, right? Like I'm not worthy if I don't do it all, or, I'm not, whatever it is their ideal is, like they're not living up to their ideal if they don't do it all, or if they ask for help, it's weakness. And it's kind of getting past all of those, like those inner dialogue thoughts that are just not healthy. And it's different for everybody, but yeah, it's definitely, again, reprioritizing yourself and rediscovering your values and making sure that you're living out some of your values. And it's hard. It's definitely hard if you have, children like this or a child like this, and you can't leave them with other people, right? You can't just go get a sitter. But that doesn't mean that you can't, take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute, like you can still do those things. It's just not going to be to the extent that you could maybe do with a typical child. You can't go away for a weekend because, but you can still do self-care. You can still do self-work and, make sure that you're not just zoning when you have 5 free minutes, which is what you tend to do. You're so exhausted and overwhelmed and just burnt out that when your kid goes to sleep, you just sit and stare at a wall because you couldn't imagine doing anything else, right? But it's like, no, take that time and, do a meditation or do something that's going to help you for something that's going to help build you up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was speaking to a few parents a few weeks ago, and I asked them this question, and they kind of took a moment to think about it, but they didn't have an answer. I was like, do you remember what you were before you were a wife, before your husband, before your father, before your mother? And it seems they forgot who they were once they became the person of that title, of a mother, of a father. And maybe sometimes when we become parents, we don't appreciate, or we can't remember what the self care looks like, because before we had kids, self-care is like every day, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then once you have kids, it's like, what am I going to do with myself? I have 5 minutes. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So when you're doing your self-care, what are some of the routines that you would do to keep yourself balanced?
Yeah. So for myself personally, uh, when I was to the point where everything was just, I was running on below empty, right? The first thing I did was literally take 5 minutes. And sometimes I would just get in the car and drive down the street, just sitting in my car, to start, right? And then it's okay, well, I'm gonna go outside, I'm gonna walk. I enjoy being out in nature, I'm gonna walk. And then I slowly started getting back to reading for enjoyment versus reading to learn more about your child's diagnosis. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna pick up a novel versus a educational book. And I am a Reiki practitioner. I've been doing that for over 25 years. So for me, getting back to meditative type of stuff and energy work on myself, things like that, that has always been a very routine part of my life, because I've just done it for so long. Getting back to that, because when you're in a state of chronic stress, that tends to be when you don't work on yourself. When you're feeling great and things are wonderful, that's when you're like, yeah, I'm going to take the time and I'm going to do all these wonderful things for myself, right? It's almost easier when you're in a good place. So yeah, it was just slowly getting back to those things and working on the guilt. Because there's just so much guilt in general. So when you add in the, dropping your kid off at a hospital, or, them, whatever activity they're doing when they're panicking, and just seeing your kid in that state, the guilt just heightens. So just, dealing with all of that stuff, but it started slow. It started very, very slow. It's kind of that, force myself to leave the house for 5 minutes was how I started kind of climbing back out of that.
For those who are watching us on Facebook, YouTube, and my social media, please continue for more wonderful interviews like the one we have with Rayne, and we will be back for more. So stay tuned.